Dear colleagues, I'm sorry I can't be there with you in person in Geneva, and I would like to thank World Youth for Climate Justice and all their supporting organizations in Geneva for co-organizing this important conversation. I've been following the oral hearings before the International Court of Justice at a distance while conducting my first country visit to Vanuatu, and also while now this week being in Kuala Lumpur to contribute to the scoping meeting of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The first reflection I would like to share with you is the lack of credibility of the arguments that have been made time and again before the court about the applicability only of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement to the matter at hand. Those arguments can't possibly be taken seriously without those states engaging more explicitly into a much greater level of detail with the intervening advisory opinion of the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, which has made abundantly clear that climate action, even if it may be in compliance with the Paris Agreement, does not exempt states from complying with obligations under other international treaties, the objectives and obligations of which are undermined by climate change. And so other international treaties, even where they do not mention climate change, can and must be interpreted so as to contain obligations to mitigate and adapt to climate change and to provide international finance to developing countries who are most affected by climate change and have least contributed to it. The same can be said for international human rights law. Insufficient or ineffective climate action, even if it may be considered in compliance with the Paris Agreement, does not shield states from applicable international human rights obligations and from their international responsibility arising from breaching of such obligations. Of course, those arguments about how carefully crafted the Paris Agreement was and how still careful intergovernmental negotiations are about its implementations are hard to believe in the aftermath of COP29, where we've seen little, if any, progress on mitigation, where we've seen little, if any, meaningful progress on international finance, and where we've seen severe problems in terms of multilateral decision-making, as well as in terms of public participation and consideration of science, indigenous knowledge, other knowledge systems, and the lived experiences of those human rights holders who are most affected by climate change. It has been also really important to see how children and young people were able to be heard, if not during the oral hearings, around the oral hearings. I think states' obligations to hear children and to protect children's rights in the context of climate change are crucial. And I was maybe surprised that not more states engaged and build their arguments on the Convention on the Rights of the Child and General Comment 26 on children's rights to a healthy environment. My final set of reflections has to do with the consequences under international law that the Court of Justice has to clarify, and of course, the very impressive opening statement by the Vanuatu team, who was so remarkable in terms of clarity, comprehensiveness, and cogent nature of the argument and interpretation put before the court. It is essential for the International Court of Justice to explore the full range of remedies under general international law and under international human rights law. And through that, clarify that the international financial norms under the international climate regime, but in fact under other international environmental agreements, are legally binding, both as a matter of primary and secondary international obligations. In addition, the guarantees of non-repetition provide a crucial opportunity to reevaluate and reprioritize climate action in terms of clarifying state obligations to phase out fossil fuels, as well as fossil fuel subsidies, and also prioritize biodiversity conservation and restoration as a matter of climate mitigation and adaptation, which was also very much underscored by the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. And the final critical point is about the modalities, how those remedies will be identified and applied, which needs to be as a matter of shared determination with the states and the frontline communities who have been most affected by climate change. There's a very clear need to move away from the current system where donor states are not responding or even listening to the needs and the knowledge of the states and the communities who have been most affected by climate change.